Hello, all Israel News viewers. I'm Oriel Moran, and behind me is the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. And we're going to go on a special tour with Nachliel, the Musuem Guy, that is taking us on a tour called Echoes of Egypt, a journey through ancient art and Jewish history, showing us the special connection between us and Egypt, what we've gone through as a nation, how we've gone through the Passover throughout all of the generations. Let's go and have some educational fun.
There are no mummies inside here, but these mummies are from the time of Ramses III, which is roughly 3,200 years ago. Chronologically, it might be the time of the judges, the Shoftim. So this is mummies in Israel when supposedly we left, and like, what's going on here? Well, these are fake mummies. These are Temu or AliExpress mummies. But they're made in Israel, and they're found in the Gaza Strip. They're found in Deir el-Balach. So in Deir el-Balach was one of many Egyptian strongholds along the Via Maris, along the pathway from Egypt to Mesopotamia, which cuts through Chatzor. So we found a lot of these. We found dozens of these, but we don't know the identity of their manufacturers, but we know that they were influenced by Egypt. But they were trying to do what Egyptians did and didn't do it so well. What this teaches us is that the Egyptian culture had a profound presence on our region in many different ways. Sometimes they absorbed things from Mesopotamia and from our region, but usually it went the other way around because they're the more powerful entity. One of the oldest Haggadot in the world is known as the Bird's Head Haggadah. It's from the year 1300 in Germany. And what's famous about it is that all the people who are dressed like medieval German Jews with that funky triangular hat, their heads are birds. And there's a question as to, it's an obvious question, why do they look like birds? And there's all kinds of silly answers that come up. And I'd like to explore possible answers. Before I give what I think is the answer and we discuss it, I'd like to encourage you to look around. So some of these are Haggadot. They're all illuminated manuscripts, which means hand-painted and hand-written parchment. Some of them are 700 years old, some are 400 years old. And these would be very expensive family heirlooms. This isn't a printed book, this is handmade. 700 years ago, everything is handwritten, there's no printed books, everything has to be copied, so it's very expensive. Now imagine making something this size and schlepping it to synagogue. So they actually chained it to the synagogue, it stayed chained to the table. You don't carry this thing around. So this would stay there. Now, this is very expensive, and so often you would have what's called a miscellany, which basically means, well, we're already paying for the job, so let's throw in a few extra works in order to make it worthwhile. So there's the Pentateuch, there's the Torah, and we'll add a few other things. So that's called a miscellany, or a michlol in Hebrew. So we have a lot of these. Now imagine, now we're going back to the Haggadah. Imagine this is being used. You can actually see the stains from usage in wine. And remember, I used to always tell my father, you're getting wine on the Haggadah. He's like, that's the point. It was used. It's not just clandestine on a shelf. Pesach is the seminal holiday for educating and connecting to our identity. Okay, I like to usually compare it in Greek mythology, it's the Battle of Troy. In Judaism, it's the Exodus. Okay, so it's very important to tell the story. And these handmade games are made by Rosa Freudenthal, who was a widow who lived in Breslau, Poland. She became a widow before World War I. Her sons both went into battle, came back. And in the devastation of post-World War I Europe, she was very poor like everybody. And she decided to pull herself together and start a business. And her business was making educational games for kids about teaching Hebrew and about the holidays. You can open the drawers and see them. And she actually worked with a number of nuns, and she had rabbis approve it to do all the artwork. Okay, so we have the concept of Haggadah, of engaging, of involving people in the story. But then there's a very important part that relates to Egyptian society that we don't think about, and that's the matzah making. So here's the thing. Let's look at the concept of matzah. This is a collage of handmade and machine-made matzah. We have lots of different tools for making matzah. Have you ever been to a matzah baking? You've probably been.
I'd love to.
You've never been?
No.
So look, you have the basket for the matzahs. You got this, called the riddler. You just riddle it with holes, and you cut out, you make it the right shape.
Yeah.
Okay, so all these different things for making shapes and so on. Now, this is what's called the finner, or it's a banger. I'm not gonna really touch it because I don't wanna, get kicked out of the museum yet, but I usually do this myself. Today they make it out of aluminum. So you just go and pound it and pound it and pound it. So it's like it's extra kneading the dough. Fine. So then we have these matzahs. But how do we look at matzah from a historic perspective of Egypt? The Egyptians invented sourdough bread. To make bread, you need an oven. To make an oven, you need a lot of wood. To have the structure for an oven, you need to be not sedentary, stationary. You need to be stationary. Most people in the world were nomads. Egypt doesn't rely on rain, so you don't need to be a nomad to follow the rain. You have the Nile. So you're dependent on the Nile, and of course through Egyptian, the hierarchy of power, of course you're dependent on power who controls the Nile. You're sort of tied in to this idea of it's all the land of the Pharaoh who rules the Nile and blesses it every day, and the whole thing. Okay. Now when we are getting ready to leave Egypt, we are told to make nomads bread. It's chipazon, doing it haphazardly, doing it quickly. Dress up, wear your belt, act out like you're about to leave. And you're eating traveler's bread. You're eating a nomadic bread, a bread that detaches you from the dependency on the Nile and on Pharaoh. Point of view of Egyptian society, the concept of individual freedom was non-existent. And that's embedded in the very food you eat. Because you're dependent on the Nile. The Nile means you don't have to travel, you just have to you're there and let things rise. And so the detachment from that in the Passover Seder for a Jew in Egypt at the time, we weren't called Jews, but Hebrews, for a person was like a separation culturally, like I'm getting into traveler mode, I am free. This is a great exhibit. It's one of its kind. It's the first archaeological exhibit in the Israel Museum that's meant for kids, and it's in the archaeology wing, and it's all about animals in Egypt. And this is a great place to talk about the Exodus, and especially the 10 plagues, and trying to understand the Egyptian mentality and how did these stories affect them. Like, what is the goal of frogs, for example? It's a bizarre thing, right? So we're going to try to go a little bit into this world. And I'm going to begin with the world of the dead, because we love talking about that. In Egypt, animals represented forces of nature. So that would be a god. So a god would be manifest in that animal. So it doesn't mean that the dog is a god, but dogs manifest that force of nature. The jackal is associated with death because they're scavengers. All right, we're not talking about a poodle. And this is a pharaoh who is bringing offerings to a statue of Anubis. Anubis is the god who's in charge of the transition from life to death. Now in Egypt, death is a positive thing. It's not a negative thing. So he isn't a bad character. We'll see it represented in different ways. Where does the dog show up in the 10 plagues? Now that you know his Egyptian association.
Yeah, well, we spoke. The jackal is also with magicians.
The Egyptian association
Wait,
is
he
death.
represents death, so it's the Makat Bechorim?
Makat Bechorot, the death of the firstborn. And there it says the most curious thing that without understanding Egyptian mythology, we would not understand. It says like this. During the death of the firstborn, L'chol b'nei Yisrael lo yicharatz kelev leshono lemish ve'ad isha. None of the dogs will snarl, stick their tongue out to all of the Israelites. But why? The second half of the verse is, Leman tedu ki Hashem ha'mafleh ben Mitzrayim u'ben Yisrael. So you will know that God differentiates between Israel and Egypt. Like, how does dogs being silent when there's death everywhere carry that message to Egyptians? Anubis. Anubis is not in control. You'd expect him to be manifest when there is death rampant. So that's a beautiful insight. I'd like to explain how we know who the Paro is. So if you come up close, they're kneeling here is what's the French call a cartouche. It's a cartridge, right? So cartouche is basically French for this. Okay, it's a cartridge. What's stuffed inside it? Hieroglyphics. So it's a cartouche. Okay, now the way you read this, you have to look it for an animal or a person, but I know now you're reading this way. You're moving this way. There's the name Ankh. Ankh means life, so it's that loop on a cross on both sides, Ankh. The symbol right next to the Ankh means God. Next, like Jet, I don't remember exactly. Next to it is Nefer, and it goes on and on. So there's some kind of name here. Now this is the pharaoh Thutmose III. Thutmose III is one of the most powerful conquering pharaohs of the ancient world. One of the earliest battles in recorded human history is the Battle of Megiddo. and he defeated the Canaanites in Megiddo. So these are all statues of the Pharaoh. These are scarabs that show you images of the Pharaoh. And in some of them, like the second row from the bottom, second from the left, shows you the Pharaoh just like in Karnak. He's standing there with a lance in his hand and he's smiting his enemy. Here is the Pharaoh in a scene of devotion with a very heavily bedecked table in front of the god Amun. And he's giving him offerings. So, and who is this? Which one? This is also Thutmose III. This one is wearing tefillin.
That's 15th century. It's the old kingdom.
Yeah. This is like, let's just say we were still in Egypt. There's basically, we're talking about a society of immigrants who over time overthrew the government and established their own kingdom at Avaris. That's the Hyksos.
Yeah.
So,
We're not the Jew.
no. But that'll be a friendly environment for Semitics, for non-Egyptians, to live comfortably in Egypt, or for Joseph to become the viceroy. That wouldn't have happened under a legitimate Egyptian.
Okay.
Now, the Egyptians ended up kicking out these people. And the thing is that the Hyksos had an advantage. They had chariots. Egyptians didn't have chariots. They came from Hattusha. They came from the Hittites.
Right.
So this is a new technology. But once they managed to get their act together, they overthrew them and established the new kingdom.
Right.
He establishes the new kingdom. A new king who doesn't know Joseph. Like, why would I acknowledge somebody who's illegitimate? I'm worried about people overthrowing us again. Let's subjugate them.
You showed us how you made. We were probably paid in beer.
Yeah,
when we were slaves
bread
in
and
Egypt.
beer is wages.
Yeah.
We actually have texts that tell us how the pyramids were paid for.
And beer.
Bread and beer. In Egypt, if you wanted to take to somebody life and good health, you would say bread and beer. That was a blessing.
Yeah.
And people who are non-Egyptians referred in a derogatory way to the Egyptians as those bread eaters. So bread is a very big deal. So this is a mummy case. There isn't an actual mummy inside here. The real mummy is over here, okay? Now, but the Egyptians, the way they embalmed, entombed people, is the reason they did it is to help the spirit reconnect with the body. And as long as you preserve the body, the spirit can have an easier time coming back into this world and tasting and eating and enjoying and playing all the same games and hearing all the family politics and stuff like that when you come to talk. So that's all that stuff is happening. Now, a key part of death is preserving the heart. And those beetles, some of them have a human head, which is like something out of a horror movie. You pick up a beetle and it says, "Put me down," right? Like this one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is creepy.
This is a heart scarab. It would be put where the heart is and wrapped up in linens so that you're protecting the deceased. Now, the other parts of the body. Yeah. I'm saying, look, they tried to preserve it, wrap it in. Now, inside these jars, known as canopic jars, they put the liver, the stomach, the lungs, and the kidneys, intestines. Okay, I'm wrapping up here. And the intestines, so that he can keep on eating, drinking the whole thing. The one organ that they didn't realize is worth anything is the brain. So they just lobotomized him and filled it up with herbs. So let's just say, these are no-brainers. But the heart was kept inside, because when you stand in judgment for the afterlife, you need your heart.
I just came out of this tour, and I'm telling you, I've learned so much, and I'm so inspired to think about the story of the Exodus so differently, and also think about the faithfulness of God to take us out of Egypt into this promised land, the same land that I'm in right now. Thank you guys for watching. If you want more Israel-related content, go to allisraelnews.com, hit the notification bell, hit subscribe, and we will see you guys in the next one.